Welcome to the latest episode of the Federal's Worldly Wise, a program that happens every week and which attempts to deconstruct international issues that are currently trending. Donald Trump, in his presidential campaign, boasted he could end the Ukraine Russia war in one day, literally. We are already 3 days into his second term as president, and there is no sign of the war ending. Is he surprised? Maybe, but the world is not. For it is always known that Trump was just being his bombastic self, making tall claims, promises, and hugely exaggerated statements. Even assuming Trump meant what he said, why has he not been able to strike a peace deal between Moscow and Kiev, between Vladimir Putin and Volodymyr Zelensky? Almost 3 years into the war, after Putin's military invaded Ukraine on February 4th, 2022, the ground situation has changed in Moscow's favor. At the beginning of the current round of conflict, Ukraine had already lost parts of the eastern Donbas region and the Crimean Peninsula to Russia. This happened in 2014. Now, Russia has extended its annexation to almost the entire eastern region, stretching down to the south. After much exertion, Ukraine managed to enter Russia's Kursk region, but is finding it difficult to hold on to it. So, this is the ground situation. If the peace deal is struck, how should it ideally look like? That status quo is restored at least as of 2022, if not 2014. But Putin has clearly stated there is no question of giving up areas that Russia is now occupying to the east and south of Ukraine. As for Zelensky, he has also said there cannot be peace until Russia has withdrawn from areas it occupies in Ukraine. Zelensky has not specified whether he meant the 2014 map or as it stood in February 2022. Trump and Putin have a reportedly long relationship. This had in fact led to accusations that Russia helped Trump with his first term victory in 2016. But the accusations were never conclusively proved. But the Putin-Trump ties have never been denied. Assuming it is true, Trump must have calculated he could convince Putin to end the war, even if it meant sacrificing Ukraine's interest to some extent. But it is easier said than done, because a peace deal has to be signed between the two parties at war. Trump has no hold personally over Zelensky. And why would Zelensky agree to give up territory to Putin in the first place? If that indeed happens, all hell will break loose in Ukraine. Zelensky's people will ask why the war in the first place? A war in which hundreds have been killed, thousands injured, and many more displaced internally, while others have been forced out of the country. Not to forget the enormous damage Russia has inflicted on Ukraine's crucial infrastructure and destroyed several towns and cities in the country. The other key condition for an end to the war is Putin's demand that Ukraine not be admitted into NATO, the military alliance of the Western allies. If Trump were to push for a ceasefire, it is incomprehensible how he will sort out this problem. After all, it was the NATO issue that triggered Russia's invasion of Ukraine in the first place. If Trump agrees to this demand, it will upset Ukraine and Zelensky in particular, and Trump's European allies as well. All the suffering and enormous difficulties experienced by Ukraine will amount to nothing. Realizing that mere diplomacy will not work, Trump has reportedly threatened Russia with more sanctions. Putin has already managed the existing sanctions rather well with the help of traditional allies like India. But Trump may not have the patience of his predecessor, Joe Biden. If Trump threatens nations which are still trading with Russia, and that includes India too, it could cause a serious crisis for these nations and for several European countries that depend on Russian oil and gas. Their economy will nosedive from their already precarious condition. Since countries like India and Turkey are rerouting Russian crude after processing it, Europe is able to manage somehow. But if Trump's threat cuts off India and Turkey as fuel conduits, it is bound to affect the European economy. Furthermore, it may not be possible for Trump to arm twist Putin, as Russia is no pushover, it is also a big power. Taking the diplomatic route is another way, but then how will he resolve Russia and Ukraine's conflicting demands? It's easier for Trump to turn off funding for Ukraine and force it to accept peace on terms that favor Putin. But that will leave the US's close allies, including nations in Western Europe, seething with anger. And in an extreme case, the European Union might even choose to support Ukraine on its own in whatever way possible, with or without the US. If that happens, it will result in a deep crack among the NATO allies with its own unpredictable consequences for them. Considering this, chances are Trump will not push beyond a point, in which case the war will fester for longer.